China's Clean Development Mechanism Fund, an explanatory video in partial fulfillment of the World Bank's course Financing for Development. Hello, and welcome to this explanatory video about China's Clean Development Mechanism Fund, shortly referred to as CDM Fund or just the Fund. In this short video, I will explain what role China's CDM Fund plays in China's climate finance strategy and through which means the fund contributes to China's climate efforts. While living in the Netherlands, I was used to the weather being part of most daily conversations. Too wet, too cold, but most of the time, too wet. Now I live in China, conversations about the weather often include a reference to the air quality index of the day, which signifies the amount of microscopic pollutants in the air. Beijing these days is suffering from thick smog which seriously affects the health and daily life of its citizens. China's carbon emissions are not however limited to a local or national scale, but equally affect our planet's climate as a whole. China is the largest polluter of all countries in the world. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, since 1850, each of the past 3 decades has been successfully warmer than the preceding decade. As a response to these risks, the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change have pledged to reduce global greenhouse gases emissions to a level which maintains the increase in global average temperature below 2 degrees. According to the panel, this objective demands a drastic 40 to 70% reduction of CO2 by 2050 compared to 2010. In this year, 2015, the member states of the United Nations have adopted 17 so-called Sustainable Development Goals, which give focus, direction, and concrete targets to policymakers and stakeholders. In the context of climate change, 5 goals related to energy, sustainable cities and communities, the protection of the planet, life on land, and life below water provide guidance and concrete goals. There is, however, a large investment gap between the climate finance required to fulfill these goals and the current level of investment. As this table illustrates, also for China, there exists a gap between what is actually invested and what is required. The investment gap in 2015 is estimated to be between 179 and 214 billion US dollar. In 2020, this gap is estimated to be even bigger, between 208 and 243 billion US dollar. Part of the international and China's efforts to bridge this financing gap is the Clean Development Mechanism, also known as CDM. CDM is part of the emission cap and trade system under the Kyoto Protocol. Under the emission cap and trade system, countries who have committed themselves to emission targets but have trouble achieving those targets in their own country may obtain emission credits abroad by investing in clean development projects in developing countries. These credits obtained, in this case by the Netherlands, may then be added to the domestic efforts to meet the emission targets. The purpose of the CDM is thus to promote clean development in developing countries and help committed countries to meet their emission targets. Globally, China amounts for more than 50% of the total issued CDM credits. From the revenue which is generated through these CDM projects, the Chinese government collects levies which are directed to the China Clean Development Mechanism Fund. Managing the revenues collected from CDM projects through the CDM Fund is a way to ensure that the government allocates the collected levies to climate change issues in the country. Besides investment by the CDM Fund in climate action, most of the resources are used to finance investment programs in order to leverage additional resources from private sector, to build capacity and to raise awareness. China's CDM Fund implements a variety of programs in order to stimulate the deployment of climate mitigation and adaptation projects and to raise public awareness. A direct form of support for projects is the provision of concessional loans of which the interest rate is well below the market rate. Another direct form of providing finance by the CDM fund is equity investment. This involves the buying of shares in environmentally sustainable enterprises and initiatives. China's CDM fund is already one of the largest shareholders on the Shanghai Environment and Energy Exchange. China's CDM fund alone, however, cannot provide all the necessary resources for climate-related investment and innovation. Therefore, an important objective of the fund is to mobilize the large potential of private climate finance through the clever use of its own resources. This is called leverage. To mobilize and channel such private flows to climate projects requires risk sharing. A tool for this purpose is, for example, partial risk guarantee, which covers private lenders against the risk involved with borrowing money for projects. Another example is loss sharing, where the fund guarantees to incur the first loss on an investment by a bank or private company. Finally, from the return on these investments, the fund provides grants for capacity building initiatives such as policy studies, research and training, and to public awareness campaigns on climate change. A successful example of a project funded by the CDM fund is the financing of a waste incineration factory in Haining City, in the red circle, which is close to my home, Hangzhou, in the blue circle. This waste incineration plant, funded by a concessional loan provided by the CDM fund, produces a twofold emission reduction effect. Firstly, the gathering of waste from landfills and crop fields prevents the waste and crop residues to compose and generate carbon dioxide. Secondly, the power generated by the heat recovery will displace the electricity otherwise generated by fossil fuel-fired power plants. China's Clean Development Mechanism Fund is an example of innovative finance which blends a multiple of finance instruments in order to mobilize the private sector to participate in clean development projects. It is only from such cooperation between private and public actors that we can give the people of Beijing back their wonderful blue skies. Thank you for your attention.